Ethan had always admired Olivia, his uncle's wife. She was elegant, confident, and effortlessly beautiful. As a child, he saw her as a caring figure, someone who treated him with warmth and kindness. But as he grew older, something changed. His admiration turned into longing. Every time she smiled at him, every time her scent lingered in the air, his heart pounded harder. It started subtly, stealing glances when she wasn't looking, watching the way she moved, the way she laughed. He would find excuses to be around her, to hear her voice, to see that sparkle in her eyes when she spoke. His uncle, oblivious to his growing obsession, often asked him to help Olivia with small tasks around the house. Ethan never refused. Every second with her felt like a stolen moment, a secret he could never confess. One evening, during a family gathering, Ethan found himself sitting beside Olivia on the couch. She looked stunning in a deep red dress that hugged her curves perfectly. The scent of her perfume, jasmine and honey, wrapped around him, making it impossible to focus on anything else. She laughed at a joke someone made, her hand playfully resting on his knee for a brief moment. The touch was innocent, casual, but it sent a shiver through him. He clenched his fists, trying to suppress the rush of emotions flooding his body. As the night went on, Olivia noticed his quietness. She leaned in slightly, her voice soft yet teasing. "Ethan, you've been so quiet today. What's on your mind?" He hesitated, swallowing the lump in his throat. "Nothing, just thinking." She smiled, tilting her head. "Thinking about what?" He wanted to say you, but instead he shook his head and looked away. "Just random things." Olivia didn't push, but the way she studied him made his heart race. Did she know? Could she see the desire in his eyes? That night, as he lay in bed, her face haunted his thoughts. The way her lips curved when she smiled, the way her dress clung to her body, the warmth of her touch, everything about her consumed him. He knew it was wrong, but no matter how hard he tried, he couldn't stop himself from wanting her. A week later, fate created an opportunity Ethan never imagined. His uncle had left for a business trip, and the rest of the family was away for the weekend. It was just him and Olivia alone in the house. The evening was quiet, except for the faint sound of rain tapping against the windows. Olivia was sitting on the couch, a glass of wine in her hand, wearing a silk robe over her nightdress. The soft glow of the lamp highlighted her delicate features, making her look even more breathtaking. Ethan sat across from her, trying to focus on the book in his hands, but his mind was elsewhere. He couldn't stop staring at her. How her fingers lightly traced the rim of her glass, how her robe slipped slightly off her shoulder, revealing smooth skin. His pulse quickened. Olivia noticed his gaze and smiled. "You seem lost in thought again," she said, tilting her head. Ethan exhaled sharply, forcing himself to look away. "Just enjoying the quiet." She chuckled softly. "It does feel different without everyone around. Peaceful in a way." A silence settled between them, thick with unspoken words. The sound of the rain grew heavier. Olivia set her glass down and stretched, the motion making her robe shift slightly. Ethan's breath hitched. "You've grown up so much, Ethan," she murmured, her eyes scanning his face. "It's strange. I still remember when you were just a boy, following me around the house." He swallowed hard. "I'm not a boy anymore." Their eyes locked, and something shifted in the air. A slow realization dawned on both of them. Ethan saw the hesitation in her gaze, the flicker of curiosity, of something forbidden. His heart pounded. Before he could stop himself, he stood up and walked toward her. He was close enough to feel the warmth of her body, to smell the sweet fragrance of her perfume. His fingers twitched, aching to touch her. Olivia didn't move. She just watched him, her lips slightly parted, her breath uneven. The distance between them was shrinking. Every fiber of Ethan's being screamed for him to close the gap. But just as he was about to, Olivia whispered, "Ethan, we shouldn't." Her voice was soft, but it wasn't a rejection. It was a warning. One that neither of them was sure they could follow. The air between them was thick with tension. Neither of them moved, yet the space between them felt smaller, almost non-existent. Ethan could hear his own heartbeat pounding in his ears, his breathing shallow as his eyes locked onto Olivia's. She didn't step back. She didn't stop him. Instead, she stared at him with an expression he had never seen before. Hesitation, longing, and something far more dangerous. Slowly, as if testing the moment, Ethan reached up, his fingers lightly brushing against her cheek. Olivia closed her eyes for a brief second, leaning into his touch before reality struck. She quickly pulled away, shaking her head. "Ethan, this is wrong," she whispered, but there was no conviction in her voice. "Then why aren't you stopping me?" he asked, his voice barely above a breath. She looked at him, her lips slightly parted, her chest rising and falling rapidly. She had no answer. Ethan took a slow, shaky step closer. His hand found hers, their fingers barely touching. A sharp inhale left her lips, but she didn't pull away. And then it happened. He leaned in, his lips hovering just above hers, waiting for her to stop him. But she didn't. Instead, she met him halfway, their lips finally touching in a soft, hesitant kiss. At first it was slow, gentle and unsure. Ethan could feel the warmth of her lips, the way she shivered at his touch. But as the seconds passed, the hesitation faded. The kiss deepened, their breaths mingling, their hands desperately pulling each other closer. Olivia's fingers ran through his hair, tugging slightly as a quiet sigh escaped her lips. Ethan wrapped his arms around her waist, pressing her body against his. He could feel her heartbeat, rapid and unsteady, matching his own. For a moment, nothing else existed. Only the intoxicating taste of her lips, the way her body melted into his, the heat of their forbidden desire. But then, just as quickly as it had started, Olivia abruptly pulled away. She stared at him, her breathing heavy, her eyes wide with realization. "We can't do this," she whispered, stepping back, her hands trembling. This isn't right." Ethan swallowed hard, his chest tightening. "Olivia." She turned away, pressing her fingers to her lips as if trying to erase what had just happened. "Please, Ethan, just go." And with that, the moment shattered, leaving only silence and the weight of what they had just done. Ethan stood frozen, his heart still racing from the taste of Olivia's lips. His hands burned from where they had held her, his mind struggling to process what had just happened. Olivia turned away from him, gripping the edge of the couch, as if she needed support. Her breaths were uneven, and when she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. "This can't happen again, Ethan." But the way she said it, the hesitation in her voice, told him she wasn't entirely convinced. She was fighting herself, torn between what was right and what her heart wanted. Ethan took a step forward, but she immediately lifted her hand to stop him. "Please just go to your room," she pleaded, her eyes filled with conflict. He wanted to say something, to tell her that what they had just shared wasn't a mistake, that it had felt too real to be wrong. But he could see the torment in her eyes, the battle she was fighting within herself. With a heavy heart, he nodded and walked away, leaving Olivia standing alone in the dimly lit room. ##### the longest night. Ethan lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying every moment over and over again. The way her lips had moved against his, the warmth of her body pressed against him, the way she had kissed him back before pulling away. His body ached for her, his mind consumed with thoughts he knew he shouldn't have. But no matter how much he tried, he couldn't erase her from his thoughts. A soft knock on his door startled him. He sat up instantly, his pulse quickening. The door opened slightly, and Olivia stood there, her robe wrapped tightly around her body, her face hidden in the shadows. "I shouldn't be here," she whispered, her voice trembling. Ethan swallowed hard. "Then why are you?" A silence stretched between them, heavy with unspoken emotions. Then in a swift motion, she stepped inside and closed the door behind her. She looked at him, her eyes filled with longing and uncertainty. "I don't know how to stop thinking about you," she admitted, her voice barely audible. Ethan's breath caught in his throat as she slowly walked toward him. "Then don't," he whispered, reaching for her hand. The war between right and wrong was still raging inside her, but at that moment desire won. The next few moments felt like an eternity as Olivia moved closer to Ethan. Her fingers trembled as they lightly brushed against his chest. The tension that had lingered between them now seemed unbearable. She looked into his eyes, searching for something. An answer, perhaps, or even the reassurance that what they were about to do wasn't a mistake. Ethan's heart was beating so loudly he feared she could hear it. Every inch of his body screamed for her. But there was a part of him that knew deep down that this was a line they couldn't uncross. And yet, as her lips met his again, that line seemed to fade away, vanishing into the heat of their kiss. Her mouth was soft and urgent, and Ethan found himself pulling her closer, his hands tracing the curves of her body, memorizing every inch of her warmth. The kiss deepened, and the world outside their little room ceased to exist. There was only them, only the electricity that sparked between them, making everything feel impossibly real. Olivia's hands slid up to his neck, pulling him closer as her body pressed into his. Ethan's mind was spinning, but he couldn't stop. He couldn't stop himself from wanting her. He wanted to hold her, to feel her completely, even though he knew it would only make everything worse. And then, just as quickly as the intensity began, Olivia pulled away again, her breathing shallow, her face flushed. She looked at him, her eyes wide with panic and guilt. "I'm sorry," she whispered, stepping back, her hands trembling. "I shouldn't have done that." Ethan's chest tightened as he tried to process her words. "Olivia." But she cut him off, her voice filled with regret. "This is wrong, Ethan. We can't keep doing this. You're my nephew's best friend. This can't happen. It can't." Her words hit him like a slap, but the hurt he felt wasn't from her rejection. It was the fear of losing her, of never being able to touch her again. He reached out, grabbing her wrist gently. "I don't care," he whispered desperately. "I don't care about the wrongness. I just care about you." She pulled away from him, her face pale. "You don't understand. If we keep going, we'll destroy everything. This can never happen again." Olivia turned quickly and hurried out of the room, leaving Ethan alone in the quiet darkness. The taste of her lips still lingered on his mouth. The scent of her perfume still wrapped around him. But the pain of knowing that he couldn't have her was almost unbearable. As he lay back down, his mind was a whirlwind of confusion and longing. He had crossed a line he could never uncross, and he was trapped in a web of desire that he could never escape.